Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this conversation about leadership. I am Dr. Marcia Chin, and we'll be spending the next hour and a half, 90 minutes, talking about leadership, talking about what it means to be a leader, and also what it means to be a leader who is making change. I actually have been studying leadership for a long time, and I'm sure many of you have been as well. And my journey started with myself as a young girl in Jamaica who wanted much more than I thought my environment offered me. And it took a lot of self-leadership to actually move through the paces of my life to get to this point where I can actually share some of my learning with my Jamaican people in my Jamaican community. And nothing gives me more honor and pleasure and absolute joy and meaning to be doing this. I've never felt that learning is for myself, but I always thought that learning was a community action, and that we together in our collaboration, we actually learn together and grow together. I attended Catholic school my entire life in Jamaica. I went to St. Catherine Primary School in Spanish Town. I went to St. Catherine. No, actually, I started at the basic school on Brunswick Avenue. Then so I'm a country girl. And then I went to the primary school that was up the road near the Anglican church. And then I went to the high school that was way over the other side on St. John's Road. And after St. Catherine High, then I tried St. Jago to do my sixth form. And after sixth form, I started working at the bank, Bank of Nova Scotia in Kingston. And then I moved on to working with Air Jamaica for many years. And in that time, I wanted more than just working. I wanted to teach. I really wanted to be a teacher. And as a young child, when I told my parents that I wanted to be a teacher, they were like, "What? Teaching don't pay any money. Why do you want to be a teacher?" So I moved away from that out of some sense of shame, like I did something wrong, I did something bad. But that's what I always wanted to do. And it's so funny that I laugh at myself to see how I come back to it. And as I'm working with in the education field now, I'm so strong on students when you to hear what they say, hear what they want, and work with them for that. Mark you, the diversion sort of expanded my world, broadened my horizons, and I was able to, by some way, make my way back to what I wanted after having two children, and as an adult went back to do my studies in leadership. And here I am teaching. But it was not my first step. I've been teaching throughout my life, and I did my dip ed at UWI in mathematics education. And then I did my internship or my practicum with St. George's College, grade 10, all boys who were not interested in math. So I've had a run of teaching experiences, and I just love to really be part of my Jamaican experience to try to move through and help and support and contribute to the educational transformation that's occurring in Jamaica and the Vision 2030 that we have. And one of the things that I really get through my entire process so far is where leadership stands in our life. And that's one of the reasons why I did my leadership studies doctorate. And then I'm now trying to really help with that education of it, further in the education of leadership, because self-leadership took me a long way to where I am today. And I'm hoping that for whatever leadership you have experienced in your life, that in fact, this could probably add some value to you. So I'm going to start my presentation, and I'm hoping for all the teachers out there, or parents out there, or educators out there, that somehow you can have a narrative resonance with what I'm saying. Because as teachers yourself, and as you're working with students and want them to gain this sort of self self-reliance, self-authorship, self-leadership of their life, that we recognize how difficult it can be and what it takes to make it occur. So let me start by sharing my slides. And then, let me see, hope you can see it. So here we are. So my title is Leading Change. I'm going to go about talking more, first starting with the perspective of leadership, and then into application, particularly for change. So we'll have 2 modules. I've organized the work where my module 1, so to speak, it presents major leadership theories, focusing on what is leadership. We always want to start with a definition. Who is a leader? And then we're going to go through different leadership perspectives and also look at the idea of followership and how that relates to leadership. Once we've set that foundation, we're going to move into module 2. That's sort of the exciting part, where we're going to look about the factors that are involved in leading change, because that's fundamentally the reason for leadership, or even the aspect of leadership. Because without change, without people, first of all, leadership doesn't occur. Because in a vacuum, leadership doesn't occur. So it has to do with people. And to have people around to lead people, it's because there's some goal, there's some change that needs to occur. So what does that mean? What does it entail? And then I'm going to offer the framework of the social change model of leadership. That's the SCM. So we're going to have that. So here we go. So by the end of today, I keep it very simple by saying you will be familiar with, because I'm sure you have done some more studies yourself. You're probably coming in very experienced. You already heard some of this, and it may just either validate, fill some gaps, or it could be new concepts that you will be exposed to. So at least for everyone, you'll be more familiar with major concepts and perspectives of leadership. I'm going to offer you some definitions of leadership and who a leader is, and what is involved in leading change, which is ultimately the purpose of leadership. So module 1, we're going to look at what is leadership? Who is a leader? What are the leadership perspectives over the year? This has been studied for a long time. It's not new. And there's been so much work that has gone into leadership studies to try to identify and really hook down one particular definition or one particular philosophy. And it's coming through, and I'm going to be sharing them with you, and then going to talk a bit about who is a follower then when you have leaders. So what is leadership? Who is a leader? I want you to first start to think about, so that you can connect with this work and that you can join me. I can't see you all face to face. So I'm imagining my audience and I'm asking you as if I was going to write it on a board, just like if I'm scripting on a board, all your answers, or if you had the opportunity to annotate on this slide. And so I'm inviting you to put your responses to this question in the chat. What comes to mind when you think of leadership? What instantly pops up? What are the ideas, the thoughts, the experiences? I'm sure it probably evokes a lot of stuff for you, perhaps. Do you have a personal philosophy? Does it exist? If you were to say what you think of leadership, would you just have one words or a phrase? Or can you step back and say, what I think leadership is this? What are your answers to that? Because it could be different. It could be what you think socially is defined as leadership. But you could also come from a place from the experience of leadership that I have, and what I've experienced and what I've seen, observed, noticed. I've come to terms that this is my philosophy of it. And why is that important to actually note? It is important because you actually act from that frame of mind, whatever you've come to. differentiating leadership from leader. If you were to define a leader, how would you define a leader? So here are some takes from a grade 5 set of students. And I love this versus, a whole professional spiel and every concept you can think of to start with. Leadership. So when you look at this blob, you can see that it displays a lot of what the activity of leadership is about. It also portrays who leaders might represent. So it's answering actually both questions. Who is a leader? What is leadership? So you have leadership as a role model. You have leadership as being in charge. You have leadership as a risk taker, someone who takes responsibility, who is powerful. So those are characteristics of a leader. Cooperation, collaboration, helpful, social justice, owner, organizer. And then you have who might represent a leader, and you have them in terms of a role model, a position, a president. You have them as a captain. But you also can see where you have them as names. Someone as Harriet Tubman, famous Black American slave woman who was really awesome in her leadership in helping her members in her community to survive. So you have different people. You have here in a grade 5 man, you have Mrs. Fisher, and it could be one of you teachers if you ask your students to write out or do this concept map of what they think of a leadership is. Your name may appear on it. Because see, even without a name, they have teacher. So it's really profound what how leadership runs our life in every way. We have a view of people, we have a view of roles, and in our society, we have created what that leadership might mean. But things are changing. We're learning so much. Our problems are evolving, getting more complex, getting more nuanced. Our global village have now so connected and are so interrelated despite COVID. So there are different types of problems that we now have that we're actually trying to address. And it takes some form of leadership and leadership roles to actually address them. And there are many. There are so many, it's almost like, so what do I choose? How do I do it? I hear about contingency, situational, transformational, transactional, trait theory. What do I choose? There are so many leadership perspectives and you almost feel like it's very confusing. And when I started out this journey of actually doing leadership studies, I found it fascinating. And one of my first assignment in the leadership theory class, which was very good for me and which is exactly what this slide is made up of, is looking at all these perspectives and coming up to terms with your interpretation of what it all looks like so you can form some framework of reference. So on this slide, the evolution of leadership theories, this is how I categorized it in my actual assignment. After reading so many books and so many theories, I saw, or what I was able to surface as themes, were the first 4, so to speak, where it started out as individual, which we're going to go into each one, where it's about I and me, the leader. Then it became a reciprocal lens of me and you. Then it added context to leadership, me, you, and the situation. And then it became beyond that. It's also the connection we have with each other. So it's the social identity. We are of a particular group. We work with a particular company. We wear the T-shirt. We wear the uniform. We group in a particular way, act in a particular way. So it is now us and we. And then now the more earlier, more current, and the movement towards leadership now is not, it's not that those prior theories have gone away, but they have gelled. It is now being recognized how relational the process of leadership is. So it became holistic. And then because of that philosophical nature, then the adaptive leadership has joined it as the most current, but the relational process and the adaptive leadership process are really sort of the more current and the ones that really are the top level of all the others mixed together. So let's go through them a little bit to make sense of them. So we're going to start with looking at the individualistic leadership perspective. This one you probably know ad nauseum, because we have spoken, that has just been like the back of our mind, where the leader is born. It's a natural trait. Only few people, it limits leadership to only a few persons with particular characteristics. They are charismatic, they can talk. Not that those aren't good, you still, but it almost like locks everybody else out of the possibility of leadership. The focus is on the leader only with particular types of trait, skills, and a way of being. And we still sort of have that running as a theme in our world. It is still there. It hasn't gone, because there are certain things that it takes a long time for it to wear out and for it to change. And we're still attracted to certain ways of persons speaking or being or presenting themselves for us to classify them as leaders. The danger of that is that you limit other leadership opportunities, other leadership possibilities, and and yourself as a leader. The fact is that leadership, as we will see later on, the way it is coined, the way it is now framed, can be by anyone. And when you only ascribe it by certain elements and certain components and only certain types of traits, you're limited to a small set of the population. And then it becomes set that there's only one way of being. So the leader only perspective was the very original leadership perspective, focusing on the I, focusing on the me, you're the center of the world and everybody turns to you and your word is king. As I say, still here, but it limits leadership to only particular persons. Then it transformed into the leader and the follower. That's where the transactional, transformational, servant leadership, team leadership, you've heard all those terms. And you've probably wondered, what type of leader am I? Am I transactional? Am I transformational? Am I servant leader? Am I a team leader? And the thing is, they're all about me and you. It's a matter of the process that you use. It's collaboration. It's a way of connecting with the persons you're working with a group. And it's very just me and you. It's more nuanced than that as we move forward. But the leader plus the follower was the next stage coming from just the leader alone. And those are all individual concepts and leadership models that if you go into them, you dig deep and see that there's a lot of richness. But the common theme is that it takes into consideration the leader and the follower. Then we move next to context. Now we're thinking, whoa, it depends on the situation. It's contingent on certain things. There's a certain path for everyone, and dependent on your goal, there is a certain way that you take that path to accomplish that goal. So it becomes leader, follower, and context. So this leadership perspective is contextual. It's me, you, and the situation. What are the situational factors that determine the leadership style? So what's going on in the situation, and you start to shift, and the task becomes specific. to that context, the leader style shifts accordingly. And it seems like it's perfect. I love this situational leadership. And in some ways, it applies. Remember, I said to you, it's not like these have gone away, but that it has been evolving. The theory of leadership has been evolving. Then it evolved to the next stage now, which we're probably more common with now if you think about it. It's now a social identity theory, where it's now us and we. So added to leader, follower, and context is now the social group. And it's sort of where we are right now, if you really take a moment and think about it, where you as even a leader now becomes a part of the social group that you're with. There's a social connection. There's a social behavior. You're influencing each other, and there are lots of intergroup relations. So this sense of we, this sense of us, making us matter, it's almost like a group thing, a group identity that becomes the movement of all these people operating together, all with a sense of us, doing it for us, being one of us. Everything is about us and we. And it's almost like exclusive to and out to the in-group only, and there is naturally out-group because of that. So as you can see, we're evolving. So we're now at the fourth stage. So we started out with leader, then leader, follower and context, and now we're at leader, follower, context, and social group. So really, what next is there? We sort of can see it. We can see the different groupings of people in our current era of social dynamics. And we can recognize this leadership perspective almost too well. But believe it or not, the leadership perspective got even more elevated. So we're now at this point where it's more philosophical, where they're saying, all right, we have all these different pieces, and we're recognizing that they're all connected. So therefore, we have to now take a more philosophical approach, a philosophical lens, a way of looking at leadership that sort of trumps everything. Meaning that, what is the essence of leadership? Then when you look at all the leadership perspectives and what's occurring and what we now recognize, we're starting to recognize how complex leadership is, how interrelated it is with many aspects. And you can't really have one precise theory that we can say it is the theory for all leadership. So this is a philosophical view that leadership is a relational process, a relational and ethical process. And the word ethical is added to it because of the approach to viewing leadership. So although there is an argument of, was Hitler a leader? You can argue that ad nauseum, because it's a matter of the lens you're using for leadership and whether ethical dilemma and ethics is part of the process of leadership for you. So this particular model, just to be clear, then puts a parameter or a container around the fact that it's not only relational, but it's ethical. So a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. So if you take a moment and even break down this very carefully crafted definition of leadership, they are very great operational word: relational, ethical, people together, accomplish positive change. There is that word. So it's not just any form of group that tries to get any form of goal achieved. It's particular about positive change. And already we know what positive change means, that it is of value added for the enhancement, it's nourishing, it's flourishing of life. So nothing that's destructive or divisive. So when you look at the leadership, relational leadership model, it has purpose as the central piece, because you're making something. There must be a purpose why you're coming together. And in that process, relationships are the focal point of the leadership process. It is vision driven by that purpose. It's not about an individual getting on the stage. It builds commitment to positive purposes. It's inclusive, it's empowering, and it's ethical. It's taking a holistic approach. So that's a process of leadership here. And then, is there anything else? Can leadership actually be defined another way? So I would call this other leadership perspective the practical piece to this philosophical perspective. So hold this philosophical perspective for what we're going to move on to in module 2, because this is where what we're going to be utilizing as our leadership definition, or a leadership philosophy, or a leadership lens, as we move into how do we make change, because it's with this lens that you view change. So when we look at then, all right, so that's the philosophy. How do we do it? So this is another type of philosophical idea of how you do it. So this is moving from theory to practice, according to Heifetz. This is where he views leadership as the activity of a citizen. So it's more now an activity. So it's a relational process to understand the philosophy, but to get it done, you think of it as an activity. So it's an activity of a citizen from any walk of life, mobilizing people to do something. So if you consider, let me move back a little bit, what that definition of relational leadership was: a relational and ethical process of people attempting to accomplish positive change. And this one, the activity of a citizen from any walk of life, mobilizing people to do something. So they have surfaced the meaning of leadership to a point where it can be anyone. It's an activity, it's ethical, it's relational with people. It can be anyone, but you're actually trying to get something done. You're trying to make change. So these two leadership perspectives are really the two anchoring and most current and most modern view of leadership. And what these two leadership perspectives actually do is that they are inclusive of everyone. The idea is anyone can be a leader. It doesn't have to be that you have a particular trait. It doesn't have to be that you have a particular skill. You don't have to be 6 feet tall, be articulate, look probably in the first phase, probably of a particular gender, being male, and maybe of a particular race in our history. But no, it's more about everyone has a possibility of taking on a leadership role. This particular process, called the adaptive leadership, speaks to a more concrete strategic approach that anyone who needs to take the lead in a situation under almost any organizational condition, no matter who is in charge. It sounds very daring, and in some way it is, but it's not, because it's not trying to suggest any coup. It's trying to say that at every level, at every aspect of our life, we actually have leadership going on. We're always looking to make some slight change. And it could be change within our families at home, among our colleagues and peers at work, in our community, and in our case, more than likely in our educational community. COVID has really given us a grand opening to actually start making some changes. We have been forced to operate very differently, whether we like it or not. And it has caused some challenges and make us almost say, wow, we're dying to get back to normal. But why go back to normal? It's an opportunity that we've been wanting to change education in some way. We now see the possibility. How can we learn from that? And these are some ideas of what that leadership for change could be like, and what current leadership is about. And what I like about the relational, as well as the leadership, the adaptive leadership model, is that it's inclusive. So no one is excluded from the leadership process. So let us also look at why everyone is included, because we can say, okay, somebody is going to take the lead and some people are going to follow. That's usually the almost dichotomy that is set up, that we have one person that lead and everybody else that follow. But in the sphere of the work of relational leadership, the belief or the stance is that effective leadership is an important aspect of leadership, that in fact, followership is a form of leadership. And the reasoning behind that is, when you think of a follower, so to speak, it has to be people who are working with you. They're your partners, they're your collaborators. They're not people who you're trying to drag around the place, forcing them to do something. That is not actually common purpose. That is actually not a vision-driven purpose. Listen, I'm not trying to say it's easy now, and I'm not even just trying to say it's a la-la land here, or that it's going to be anything that is a bed of roses. But when you really think technically about it, we aspire for persons in our group, in our team, that as we're working towards an established goal, that we have ideal partners, ideal collaborators. And within that, there's a context as to how followership occurs, whether the person is going to do as I say, or it's going to be a dialogue where what the follower in definition does is really a consensus that's agreed upon by the group, including the defined positional leader. So ultimately, you can think of leader follower then, when you place it like that, as a continuum, that in fact it's not one or the other, that you are actually in a process of leadership as you work through what is the goal, what is my role. So you're moving and you're taking leadership of your particular role. So in every goal, there are, of course, targets, objectives, milestones. And when you, as a member of the group, are assigned a particular objective in that larger vision, you're actually leading that portion. So when you're to lead in your particular goal or your particular assignment, but you also know when to follow when you come into the larger group, where you're a member of the larger group. So take this perspective of followership, not in the traditional former view where it is someone of a lesser position who probably plays a passive role. In fact, it is definitely not in this current dynamic, in this current era where everyone matters, where inclusion is a top priority because of the recognition of the gifts and strengths of everyone, and that everyone adds value to the process. What you bring to the table is important, and it should be put on the table. So breathe that in a little bit if it's a new idea. So we're sort of coming to the end of the first module. So just want to wrap up back where we're holding our definition of leadership. So from Comives and Wagner, a relational process, a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. And then from Heifetz, the activity of a citizen from any walk of life, mobilizing people to do something. These are the two leadership perspectives that I'm wanting you to take away from this session, so you can recognize that it's an inclusive process, and however you might have thought of leadership before, you can place it at a more objective level, that you can change out a process of people, that people can be in a group and that accomplishing positive change, that in fact, whatever you're about, the vision is that something good should come from it. And it's the act of a citizen, that process of a citizen, meaning someone that's invested from any walk of life, anything, anywhere, any level, any job, any setting. Once you're pulling people together as a team to get something done, that is actually leadership. And it's everywhere in every aspect of our lives. And it should be recognized as such. And that the leader, if we're going to define someone who is probably, whose role probably is one that they can connect with people in a way that they can pull people together, they can rally a group, then usually that person gets ascribed that way because they have that sort of, nowadays we call it influencer. But really not at the end of the day for it to become in some way pathological, where that person's word become God, but more about the fact that the person's role or talent or gift is being able to rally people, being able to connect people, being able to pull people together for one cause, but together to actually get you mobilized towards a common goal. Not the goal for that individual, but a common goal because you all believed in this mission to begin with. A person who actively engages with others to accomplish change, positive change. So we have leadership as a relational process and an activity. And we have a leader as anyone, any walk of life, mobilizing people to accomplish a common positive change. I'm going to play this video for you. It's an example of that created an Indian boy and how he sort of expressed an exercise of leadership in a way that is uncommon, but it's going to show you what I mean from what I've explained. So let me stop sharing my slide and just go directly to getting this video played for you. One moment. I'm trying to get it to play without actually having a problem. All right, here we go. So turn your volumes up. I'm going to try to see if I can play it the loudest I can.
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है। चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले। लगा हाथ के सूरज सुबह निकाला करे, हथेलियों में भरे धूप और उछाल करे। लगा हाथ के सूरज सुबह निकाला करे, हथेलियों में भरे धूप और उछाल करे। उफक पे पाँव रखो और चलो अकड़ के चलो, उफक पे पाँव रखो और चलो अकड़ के चलो, फलक पकड़ के उठो और हवा पकड़ के चलो, फलक पकड़ के उठो और हवा पकड़ के चलो। तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, हिंदुस्तान चले।
All right. I hope you got the message from that particular video. It really just portrayed where leadership arose in that scenario. A tree's falling over, lots of chaos, everybody waiting for the leadership of the situation to occur. And what arose was a little young boy who was able to see that that tree in his mind just need to move. He emerged as a leader there, where he was able to take an act that actually brought people together to solve the problem so things can get moving. And persons got inspired by what they saw as a first action and joined in, got mobilized, got the problem solved, and moved on. So as you can see at the end, it was just a celebration of it. And then life moved on, a change occurred, a problem was solved, the leadership emerged from any citizen from any walk of life that can mobilize people to make a positive change. And that's the example, or I'm hoping that that video demonstrated what I meant for those last two. So let me pause here right now before I go on to module 2 to see if I have any questions, and I'm going to put some questions out to see if I will get any responses to it. Let me share about my slides. And so these are some questions I'm asking you to consider. So these are my questions. I'd love to hear your questions, your comments on what has been presented so far on the evolution of leadership perspectives, where we are now with the view of leadership and who a leader might be. At the same time, even before I share this, how did you define, interpret, and exercise leadership? Sorry. And who do you think of as a leader? Is it you, others? What activities have you been engaged in as a leader? Do you exercise leadership often in your life? Do you see it? Are you able to see now from what I've presented that in fact we're doing that constantly? Or do you shy away from it? You recognize it and shy away from it? So let me pause right here and see if I'll get any input. Okay, I see one comment. Profound. It takes one person to make a positive change so others can follow. Absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody takes an action. Somebody who is brave, somebody who is courageous. Not that the rest of us aren't, but sometimes we see it and it's almost like it could be scary. It makes you vulnerable when you have to put yourself out there. I am like that. There are some things I could do and I just don't do it. It scares me. So I'm very courageous in some things, but in other things it's like, no, I'm waiting for somebody else to do it. And then afterwards, sometimes I feel really cheap about it, but it's like, that's human being. Carolyn, I see when I think of a leader, the first thing that comes to mind is a person who is responsible for a certain task. Yeah. So that's usually positional leadership. And in many ways, that's really how we've set it up, because we have to set up hierarchies, we have to set up structures, and we're coming from, eons of defining leadership and organizational structures a particular way. So we get positions and we know they're also tied to money. So you want to get that position. And with that position, you have more responsibility and you can make certain decisions. And for learning organizations who do appoint, and it's important to do that, positional leaders, is that the exercise of leadership is one where it's inclusive, it's ethical, and it actually brings people together in a way that each person doesn't feel like a passive follower or a creature of instruction, but someone who is actively engaged in the process of taking on their assignment and lead that assignment with as much joy, with as much empowerment, and with as much energy, so that they don't feel like they're any less, or they add any less value to the process. And it's all a process of learning how to become that that broad, have the gravitas of an experienced leader. It takes some time to get to the point of being an experienced leader, where you're bringing in all the different aspects of human relations, because that's really a lot of what the work is when you especially have big visions. And Nicole, leadership is a broad word, and many try to be leaders, but due to arrogance, many fail in the role. Oh, definitely. Been there, done that. I'm not even going to try to even say, I wouldn't say we in that case, because now that I'm more learned, I'm older, I've been married how many years, I've had 2 children, I have to go through it. And I look back sometimes, I'm like, what was I thinking? Oh my God. So it really takes that type of approach to look at yourself and reflect. And that's why I'm asking you these questions, so you can reflect on yourself while we look at others and we can now see different things. It's more out of compassion to say, wow, I can now see what I don't want to be, or I can see what I want to be, and I can see probably how I can try to transform that process. Like, be coffee, anything that once you add coffee into something, oh, it just transforms the world just by the smell of coffee. It's just so great. And I just heard a quote about, and that's, do you want to be a coffee in the situation where you transform it? So it's not so much in judgment, but a recognition of what you don't want or what you want, or how we can transform it. And arrogance is, definitely one of the cardinal sins, and it carries us down all the time. Natalie, all of us are leaders in our own right, but we don't recognize it at times. That's it. That's the takeaway here. All of us are leaders. Every single one of us are leaders. So it's not an activity for only a few. And we are all at different stages of our leadership development, or our gravitas, or our way to carry out the leadership role, and consider all the nuances of leadership, and be able to make everyone feel like they're part of it. It takes work. So don't even feel bad if you make a mistake. It's just really how you clean it up. That apology, that sincerity, try to shift things around, instead of hanging on to pride, or hanging on to, you got to be right because it's difficult for you in the moment. Monique, support given to a team by a body or individual. A leader is someone who guides and supports a given task. Example, our prime minister who leads the country along with his leadership body. Absolutely. I mean, that's at the world stage level. Can you imagine how difficult that job is as a leader on the world stage? I mean, sometimes I'm thinking, God, I'd love to be the leader of Jamaica. Honestly, I'm sure many of us sometimes wonder, if I was leader, I'd do this, this, and this. But until you fill those shoes, sometimes I don't know how it is done, but it is definitely different levels of being able to manage a broader field of people, and isms and schisms and issues, and how you hold yourself there to try to actually guide and support many leaders in the organization. I often do not volunteer for leadership roles. I get that. I hope you'll try, Karen, after this. Leader, because when you start to recognize yourself as a leader, but at the same time, you want to take steps so that you are going to stretch yourself to learn and probably make some hoops, but doing the preparation, there's so much information everywhere now to help yourself. It's almost like you don't even need to go to a class, but a class gives you the structure and a class guides you. So it's good to have that, especially if you need a leadership coach or someone to take you through the process of developing your capacity. So leaders have to work twice as hard, yet we receive the same grades. If we do not want the group to fail, you have to pick up the slack. And it is true, but is that the way to carry it? Is there another way to carry it? I want you to consider, if your capacity for leadership, especially of yourself, grows, what would that mean when you're in a team that is goofing off? Is there another way in which you could actually inspire the team to operate differently, coming from a leadership lens, with yourself as a leader, not to take on the work? Because is that leadership? Are you shying away from leadership there by not probably thinking of a different way you can orient this? But not that it's going to be perfect all the time. So let me just sort of still, balance that out with saying you might have some difficult people to deal with. But I would say try it out. Try out having a conversation or thinking about, reflecting on how differently can I operate in this situation? How can I inspire the group to really operate differently and more authentically, more ethically? Althea, leaders are persons who want to see others grow, and so they set the environment for that to happen. I love that one because it's definitely setting the context. It is where you have inclusion. That's the whole view of looking at it as an inclusive process, because even for the person who might not be the greatest skilled at many of the other things, a person is on that team for some gift that they have. And the role of the leader, positional, appointed, assigned, and as well as the rest of the team, not only the leader, as well as the rest of the team, is to appreciate the value of all team members. Because as a group, you will come together and you will actually feed off each other's appreciation, so to speak. So it's not, but sometimes what happens, the leader has to sort of lead that intention so that it sets the culture, because that person who is assigned tend to set the tone, because that's the gift they bring to actually the group work. They have the ability to read the social dynamics faster, easier, probably more correct. And they have the ability to say some words in ways that is effective in persons receiving it well. So it's not just their ability to articulate, but in a way that people receive the good intention and then are aspired to be better, aspire to raise the bar, and people get it and get them. These comments have been great. Thank you very much. So we're moving on time, and I'm going to now move into our module 2, where now that we've set the background for the leadership perspective and how we're now viewing leadership, a relational process. It's a process that can be for anyone, and leadership opportunities are there throughout. So we're going to look at what it then means to lead change. And then I'm going to offer you the social change model of leadership as a framework, as a structure to apply to grow your leadership ability if you want to make change. And it doesn't have to mean great big changes, but as educators, if I'm going to put it in the context now, different from your home and just other societal things, probably in education, in your classroom, I'm just placing it there just to probably relate it better. If there's something you want to change in your school, in how things are done in your class, how you're working with your peers, things that you believe people will actually gather around on, what could you do to inspire that? What do you aspire for your team? So in the social change model, so I've put up both here. Oh, I see another one. So one of the major aspects of leadership for me is definitely trying to continuously improve. Oh, definitely. It never stops. Being introspective, powerful, and making a conscious effort to improve how you handle situations and persons. That is really profound. So you want to see people grow, but you also have to keep working on yourself. And I definitely do. I mean, I get work, just my 2 adult children. Gosh, trying to lead 2 adult children, I get wake-up calls from that a lot, because they want their boundaries, and I'm still mommy. the other day, I was doing something and I called my son to say, hey, come and do this for me, quick, quick, quick. And he didn't respond. And afterwards I was like, what are you doing? And when I looked up, he just was standing there and he looked at me and he said, you can't just call me like that and expect me to respond. You know, I'm a big man. I'm not a child anymore. I was floored. So what does that have to do with leadership? It has to do with the fact as a mother, as a parent, as an adult, but also working with somebody else who's an adult. This could have been in my organization where I'm a positional leader and I have team members, and I might have operated in a way that offends their sense of person, of who they believe they are and how I should communicate with them. So I had to pause there and reframe who my son is to me and not be offended by him and tell him off as we do in Jamaica, but more to recognize that he's actually trying to form himself as a man, come into his own leadership as a adult, and therefore is trying to assert that. And because I recognize that from the training I've had in leadership and I didn't get triggered, I was able to say, you're right. Okay, I now understand better how to work with you as an adult and not a child. And it brought a smile to his face. It's almost like he was relieved that I didn't cuss him out. So that's where I put my arrogance aside and my pride aside and all I thought was right aside. So that kid, Cassine Cooper, what you're saying there, being introspective, but also introspective in the moment, and that consciousness all the time is so critical, because you get triggered. We're all now stressed and everything is just bad and wrong, and we're easy to believe that we have the right to just cuss off somebody, even our own children, which is very easy. But you know, I want to hold myself and anchor myself in a way that I can recognize a person as an individual with a right to feel honored, and I need to learn how they see that. So thank you for that, Cassine. So I'll go back to where I was at my slide. So in leading change, I've put together the social change model, which is a relational process, and the adaptive change model, which is the practical approach, the straightforward methods. Put them beside each other to show you, their commonality, but show you that one is more aspirational because it's more philosophical, while the adaptive leadership model is a more straightforward, concrete process, but they're very common. So the social change model approaches leadership as a purposeful, collaborative, values-based process. So it's a process that is not a position, frames leadership as a process, and a leader as anyone, and it is socially responsible. And the straightforward is almost saying the same thing, but it's the way you do it, where adaptive leadership, and the word adaptive is how you help people to do the adjustment. That's why they call it adaptive leadership, because they see that leadership, because it's about change and you're helping people to actually adapt to a new situation at the end of the day. That's what change is. So you help individuals and organizations adapt and thrive in the face of challenge and prepare them to take on the process of change. So if you look at the two top bullets, they're saying the same but different. One is, the more philosophical lens, and the other one is, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to help you to adapt and thrive in the face of challenge, because there's going to be resistance to change always. So, and that's a recognition of the adaptive leadership. It's not just saying, listen, it's all pretty. It's dangerous. And that's why some persons say they don't volunteer for leadership role, because it comes with problems. Heifetz call it dangerous work. But once you know what you're about and you sort of build yourself around how you're going to anchor yourself in your position and operating ethically, that's just what it is when you take on such a role. And where leadership here is an activity, so as much as it's a process on the social change model, it is an activity. You're actually going to do something. You're going to diagnose, you're going to interrupt, because you're going to try to deprogram and reprogram and innovate to create capabilities aligned with an aspiration of an organization or individual. So if you have a vision created, and to get to that vision, there are some things that are along the way that probably will not work and it will have to be interrupted. You have to come up with new ideas in order to align with getting that, or you're going to get displaced in your goal. And being socially responsible, it impacts change on behalf of others. So for those sometimes who can't, their voice doesn't get aired because, of where they are on the tier, you do the collection of it and mobilize people and act sometimes for others to join, as you saw in that Indian boy clip. He just did it and other people saw, interpreted, make sense of it and rallied around it. So here we are with these ways of seeing how you can make change. So as I move forward, this is what I want you to do so you can connect to it, because we'll then have the Q&A at the end. So in this moment, think about some aspiration that you have. So although we might be all educators here, but you're also parents, you're also family members, your sisters, your brothers, your colleagues, your peers, your team leaders, and community members. So anywhere you are, you're probably in some group, and there are things that are happening there, and you might be in roles or not be in roles to make a change, but you still feel like it could be better. So think about that particular group you might be in. Think about the current reality that you don't like. What is making you uncomfortable? What you'd like to be different? And then think about the aspiration, what you think is possible, what you think could be an end goal. And the difference between the current reality and the aspiration is what they call a leadership opportunity. And sometimes, I don't want you to get scared by it, like you have to lead it. Sometimes it's just a conversation. Sometimes it could just mean, maybe I could talk to the leader, maybe set a meeting and just have a conversation with the person to actually activate the process. So I don't want you to think that item 3 is like, oh God, I have to really get going here and rally people. How am I going to do it? It can just be any type of action to make that start going, because really what you're thinking about is number 4. What can you do to close the gap? What can you do to make progress is more a more accessible way of thinking how to close the gap, because things take time. Because if we think of leadership as a process, leadership as an activity, so it's a process that's going to take probably a long time. And it's an activity. So an activity is a series of steps. So what could be that first step? And when you think of it like that, it sort of breaks it down, makes it manageable. So what can you do to make progress in moving from the current reality closer to your aspiration? So probably what's that first step? So you can take it bit by bit. And as you take that first step, then you probably see what happens before you even figure out what the next step may be. Although you may have plans, it may be that you may have to course shift as you go along and meander because of how people may react, or the reactions that may come from whatever first step you may make. And if you go a lot into the work of adaptive leadership, which could be another JAMINAR, because adaptive leadership is fun to think about, honestly, the activities, but we're going to look at the social change model today because I like the structure of it and to give you the way to break it down before we go on. So I'm going to talk as much as the adaptive leadership strategies are there. That's a different type of conversation into the nitty-gritties, where the social change model offers you a structure, a framing of how people are grouped and what you need to do first to start. So it's a better way to get grounded into what it needs to make change. So I'm going to go into the social change model of leadership because of the collaborative, inclusive, and accessible framework it sets up. rooted in values, about community involvement, and that being a powerful vehicle for leadership. So the social change model of leadership, developed by Ives and Wagner, is comprises, it's really sort of 8 values, but there are 7 C's, and then which is 7 values broken up or grouped in individual values that has 3, group values that have 3, and then the societal values that have 1. And then the change, that word in the middle, is actually the hub of all the values. Change is the first major anchoring value. Then it concept out to the different individual, group, societal / community values. And when you have that framework, you get a sense of, okay, let me look at individual, because that's where it's going to start. Before you can make a step, as someone shared earlier on, that introspection, who are you? What's your leadership philosophy? How do you see leadership? What do you want to change, and how are you going to go about it? Who are you in the process? Can you make certain changes? Can you actually do certain actions? Or is it the action of others? So looking at the individual values is profoundly a first step before you consider then, how do I place myself in the group? And then how the group gets mobilized to make changes in society. That's really what this change model is helping you see, the different structures and groupings of movement, because it's all dynamic and all related. Because even in society, once you start moving around, it's not, if you notice all the arrows are there, it's interrelated, going back and forth, because who you are as an individual. One day you could be the leader in the leader role, driving something forward, or another day you could be the person that's supposedly a member or a participant with other groups being led, so to speak, by someone else. So it's that ability to sort of understand yourself, your management of that, your role within the group. So activity can take place in the community to actually make change occur. Let's look at the individual values then. Consciousness of self. What does that actually mean? Commitment. That word is very common. Congruence. Probably not so common, but you probably understand it in some concepts, like probably mathematical concepts, when you talk about congruent triangles or stuff like that. I do mathematics as well. So when you think of consciousness of self, when you think of the individual and you're thinking of consciousness of self, in simple terms, that's knowing yourself, who you are, what is your particular gifts, strengths, and probably, as we'd call on the shadow side, what are some of our triggers, what are stuff about ourselves that we need to recognize that can get played out in a situation if you're not conscious or fully conscious. And I'm still coming back to Cassine's comment about being introspective and make a conscious effort to improve how you handle situations and persons. That is a very big part of the individualized values. And so it's awareness of your beliefs, your attitudes, your emotions. So it's your knowledge, your skills, your attitudes that motivates you to take action. And it is really key to develop your consciousness of yourself, and also in relation to others and of others. So, for example, in the example I gave you of my son and myself, if I didn't consider myself a leader, a teacher, an educational consultant, where I'm working with other students, I'm working with other educators, I'm working with parents, and I'm seeing that I am trying to convey these concepts, but I'm not living that myself, then that I would not be in congruence. I'm just trying to make you see how those all tie. I would not be in congruence as to those concepts and be able to, in reality, work with people and be able to help them through the moments when we're not at our best. And our commitment to our growth and development as being that person who can really make a positive contribution has to really be deeply like resolved. Like within you, it's resolute that you really want to be a leader in whatever you're taking on. You want to make sure that your inner world and your outer world is work that you continually have going on to make sure you're in congruence and you're committed to your growth. So your commitment is what they call like your psychic energy, because it's not like you can, it's all in your head. So it's really psychic. You're saying, I'm committed, and you're going to be loyal to that energy that motivates you to serve and drive the collective effort, and that the duration, and you're in there for the long run. So congruence is key, because you're able to follow through with that commitment actually when what you say, which is your what we say is your creed, and what your deed is in alignment. So your deed and creed should match. We're not perfect human beings. That's why the work forgiveness and apology exists. But the more you bring that down is the more progress you're making. So nothing I'm saying here, don't take it to the end of perfection. We're still human beings, but at the same time, don't excuse yourself if you are not be committed to your process of learning about who you are. Now, this in itself is work. This is where you can probably, like for myself, I use coaches. I have coaches both for leadership and coaches for spiritual, because I want to maintain ethical values. I want to work with harmony. And when I'm feeling like I'm offbeat, I make sure I know that I need some persons to bring me back in balance, where I can have a safe conversation. So I do utilize coaches and spiritual director to help me walk my journey of growing, of remaining conscious and true to myself, making sure I build my congruence, and that I'm clear about what I'm committed to, so that I'm not just pleasing somebody, but in fact, it's something that I choose to do and want to do, and therefore my commitment is there. So that's lots of conversation about individualized values, because I know this is the anchor, and having gone through that, what they call it, metanoia, that journey myself, I know what it takes. And I'm trying to ensure that in my conversation with you, I'm not conveying it like it's easy. So to learn about yourself, there are different sort of assessment tests that you can take to help you along the way. I love moving from a point of strength. So there's the strength finder that you can use. You can actually Google strength finder, and you can find the different types of strength finder tests. And I would say go with the free one, so you can start somewhere. Don't buy anything that's too expensive. There are the better ones, so to speak, of course, cost money, but you can start learning about certain elements that have been studied that we know, and don't get too categorized by the labels of some of these tests. But it's just a way of starting to get to know yourself from a research study point of view, in terms of certain concepts that have been defined. Because when you speak to friends and family, they will tell you some truths, but they will also not tell you some things. So you have to do some work for yourself to find that out. But there are different types. But I would suggest start out with like a strength finder to know what your strengths are, so you can move from that. Don't try to find out what's wrong with you. Then you're focusing on the wrong thing. So the more you get conscious of your strengths and your talents and your gifts, you get to put that out in the world. And I like positive psychology, but I don't fool myself either. But at the end of the day, I think focusing on your strengths, leading with your strengths, is a good place to start to learn about who you are, where you stand, and so you can work on your congruence, your internal and outer and external life, so your deed and creed can match, so you can figure out what work you want to do in this world, so you can commit to it. All right, enough on that one. So let me see if I can group values now. That's the next group, the next 3 C's of the social change model. This, as you can see, are really group values. It's about working with people, collaboration, common purpose. And that controversy with civility is that it's really that you can air whatever viewpoints that you may have different among each other in a group. That's where you're trying to be civil. So recognizing, ultimately what that means is recognizing that in a group, people will be different. And it's really through that lens, accepting the differences and finding what is common, and that you can meet on those grounds. And that what may be different is where somebody carries something else that is of value to the group and how it can be utilized. So it's a constructive and productive process of recognizing how different and similar we are and how you can work it out so that you can have a constructive, collaborative process. You're able to identify a vision and decide on a common purpose. Once you've sort of settled that issue and not believing that, well, she's not like us, she doesn't belong here. I mean, we can go with that forever and then we'll end up with no one. But just accepting that, in fact, we all will come with different viewpoints, put them on the table. That's how change occurs. Because if we keep playing in the same playpen, we're not going to have change occur. We'll be fooling ourselves. So you have to be open enough, brave enough, one as an individual, to put your different point of view on the table in a way, that's how your capacity is growing, in a way that people can hear you, can recognize that you're confident of what you're bringing to the group by just accepting that, this is how I see it. This is what I have to say, and then being humble enough to say, what do you all think about it? Can this be useful? Recognizing that they may or may not take it out, but you have reasoned it out. You've understood the vision and you're saying, this is how I want to collaborate. This is what I want to contribute. Can we put this in the bowl to see if it has use for the group? And then for those who are leading and for those who are peers, the appreciation of each other. Appreciation, even if somebody says something that you think, oh, that was so stupid, or where did they come from with that? Just recognize it's just different from what you've probably ever heard. And to be kind, just to be kind. That person was brave enough to put that in the space, probably knowing you're all gonna laugh anyway. I've had those moments and it's almost like it's so difficult, it can shut you down. But it takes a lot of conscious effort to do that, to be inclusive. It is not easy. It is not easy. So that's the group values. Storming before the norming. And then the societal community values, where it's citizenship. So you've worked on yourself, you're working with groups, and you're recognizing who you are and how you relate to the group. And then you're about this commitment. You're now a citizen and you're forming citizenship to actually, in your community, make a change. And that's where the group now expands beyond just that small active group to the group that the change, or the place, the context where the change is going to occur. And that's where it really broadens. And how do you fit into that? And that social dynamic is going back and forth, and you are growing as an individual, you're growing as a group, you're shifting and changing. You're going to have quarrels, you're going to have breakdowns, you're going to have things that's just don't go right. And it's just how you manage yourself in the process. And it happens all the time. It never stops. It never, ever stops. It's part of being in the world, being engaged and being active, and accepting that that is actually part of the process of life. Because even if you don't take on leadership roles per se, those gaps are actually still occurring in your life. It's still occurring in your life, and you can't run away from it. So you ultimately want change. So change, that's the middle of the entire social change model. They call it the 8th C, is the hub value. So it is a goal of the creative process of leadership. And I like how they call it the creative process, because it's essentially you're making it up as you go along. You're reading the situation, you're coming up with ideas, you're going back and forth, and you're creating something anew. Because ultimately, you want something that is better. You want a better world, a better society for yourself and others. You're not going on this, no matter what, even if people behave badly, there's something at stake for them while they're taking part in any change process. There's something at stake. And when they choose to behave badly, there's a loss. Something they're going to lose, and they don't like it. They're scared of that change. And that's where in the adaptive leadership process, it speaks to that shadowed side of change. It shows you, or goes through the process of you actually using the balcony perspective, where you go on the balcony to observe the process, observe people, observe and look for patterns and connections, see how leadership is operating on that balcony. I mean, you can physically think of it like a dance floor and a balcony, and you come off the dance floor, you go on the balcony, and you look down, and you can see everyone from a distance. And you can see all the movements, who is dancing with who is probably standing up and not dancing. They're dancing with somebody, but they're not dancing in a way that you're like, they don't look like they're enjoying themselves. It's like people watch, but watch with that intention of, what do I need? Are things aligned? Are things moving the way that is aligned with the goal? And if it's not, what are those elements? Who are those persons? And then what action need to occur? And then select actually what may be a linear process, like what will be the first action before the next one occurs. So to make the world and society a better place for ourselves and others is about change. The social change model offers you a structural lens to set yourselves up, where you first, before you go out to start making any change, do some reflection, get to know yourself, look at your motives for wanting to make this change, and what role you will be playing in making that change. And if you're in congruence in really what your intentions are outside and inside, and you're committed to the process, and you want to go about it in an ethical, relational manner, then who do you rally? What group do you get involved with? How do you get inspiration going? Do you take an action like that little Indian boy? Do you make an action that people will see, like probably post something on Facebook in this context now, or I don't know, and or tweet something, and then you see your response, and then you get it going, and get a group together, and then see how the group can come together and collaborate, finding a common purpose amidst it, and recognizing how different you all may be in that group, and what you need to probably air before, and then how you can move to make that change in society. So that's really what it is to make change happen in a nutshell. So the time has just gone so fast. I'm an hour and a half in, and I'm then going to pause here, because I think I've given a lot for you to process in the time I've been talking. And I want you now to share your aspiration. I'd ask you before I share the lead in change slides, what was your aspiration? Did you think about that aspiration while I was talking? Were you able to identify a gap, like what is really occurring now, and what you'd like to see change, and where you see a leadership opportunity, whether it's you or somebody else, and how you could close that gap? What action could you take to make progress? I'd love to hear your feedback. And if none of these, any questions you might have for what I've presented so far. So Perline Gordon, Very good reference to the relationship with your son. Thank you. I'm glad that worked. Sometimes leaders forget to reflect. As a result, becomes bossy and arrogant, causing persons to feel belittled. Trust me, it happens all the time. But you know what I found interesting, Perline? These persons actually believe they're good, that they're being good. They believe they're good people. They believe they have the right to do what they do, and they excuse themselves. It happens even now. That I'm experiencing it even now with some persons I'm working on a project, and the lead assigned, it's because of my commitment why I remain. And then I try to literally ask questions to shift the energy. And the person knows what she's doing, because she said to me, don't you get upset about anything? And I smiled inside. I'm like, oh, you've been trying to bait me. You've been trying to see what I would do. So it's just, but it's been a learning process, because there was a time I would have let her have it. But moving beyond just the person and just my commitment to what the objective actually keeps me focused and let me not take on persons' own battles and their own demons and leave them to deal with it and not be drawn into it. It takes a lot, but it has served me well. Teamwork makes the dream works. A leader supervisor makes way for others to shine and work to accomplish it. Clover, of course, teamwork, dream work. If it was that easy, but ultimately that's the philosophy. Ultimately, that's what we want. We all want to get along. I do believe that. I do believe that. But we all have different things. We all have different values. We all have different things at stake. We all want different things. Similar, but different. You want to live a quality life. You want to have longevity. You want to have good family life. And you want to have enough money to, have a certain standard and to do travel and whatever. But we all go about it differently. And we all want it at different levels. As a fisherman said in a story I read, he just really want to have his boat so he can go out to fish and then come back home, eat dinner and have sex with his wife. That's what he wants. At first it was like, okay, but a rich man, what he wants to do, a very wealthy person, probably similar, he would want to go out to have his fun, but probably take a private jet over to Paris, have dinner with his wife or family over there, and then go shopping in London and then come back. So it's just different levels. So people fight for different things because they have their own way in which they'd see it. Clover, teamwork, novelet. Leadership activities provide that opportunity to practice. They are individual or team exercises that allow you to test and improve your abilities in a control situation. Absolutely. When I'm doing a leadership workshop, it is that type of opportunity to do exercises. When I lead a workshop, sometimes I'll bring in a test. So I'd probably get some form of assessment for you to recognize, to take the test to recognize certain aspect about you. You have to take many different types of tests. There are so many different type of individual assessments, personality assessments, and you do it for fun. And you learn one thing about yourself that probably surprise you or probably disappoint you. And but at least you're aware, and that's how you grow. And those exercises allow you to definitely improve. Jules, some persons shy away from leadership opportunities because organizations lack accountability, creative spirit is stifled, and stress factors, so they believe it's not worth it. Boy, that's a sad situation. I vowed fairly early in my life that I was never going to do a type of work I didn't want to do. A type of work. I'm not talking about people now, because just like the situation I have now, if I was not committed to the type of work, people would have made me walk away. But if it's a type of work, if I'm working at something I don't like, then it's easy to walk away. But a toxic environment is not somewhere where you can thrive. And I probably would look for ways to get out of that situation if you are not in a position to be a coffee in that situation, to transform it, to make the to get the toxins away. So that's really not a good place to work in, because it's going to affect who you are. It's going to affect who you are. Michelle, I think members of the group should be able to communicate freely without fear of reprisal. You know, that's you know, where we set up a learning organization where you have no whistleblower, so to speak, situation where because you talk, you know, you're a problem person. And at this, you know, you have to read the situation. You can't put yourself at risk if you, as you get to know yourself, those individualized goals, you want to really get open up with that first before you make certain steps like that, because you could put yourself at risk unwisely so, because the repercussions of that, if you're going to take that step, you have to be able to manage that. You have to have a situation where you know that even if there are reprisals, so to speak, it's something you can deal with. You prepared yourself for that. So I can see from some of the comments that atmospheres, the working environment is not conducive to you taking up leadership opportunities, because no one's answering any of the share that I've asked here, but the comments I'm getting is this sense of being stifled, this sense of being held back, because one, you may need to build some leadership capacity there. So I'm not going to put that aside, but also that you're not motivated really in the current context you're in because of how toxic it might be. And that is not a learning organization that's inclusive and allows for input from anyone. And if that is not supported, it is a very hard setting. But when you consider that in some contexts, some organizations are not as progressive, but also in some countries, and even Jamaica itself, because we're a developing nation, it's not a bad word, it's more a word to be that we're still steeped in some of our traditional ways of thinking, traditional organizations, traditional ways of being. And although we're exposed to many first world ideas and we're up with probably technologies and phone and dress wear and just the swag, when it comes to the bigger ideals, the bigger issues of working through making change, it's really very hard and probably going to take a long time. So it's going to take some courageous step to first start with yourself as an individual. And that's what I'm going to leave you with as the last point, that in the social change model, I would encourage you first to start knowing yourself. Start knowing yourself, build your level of consciousness, do an exploration of your congruence. Are you living who you are inside, or what you are outside is different from who you are inside? And where is your commitment? I'm going to leave you with that as a way to grow your leadership and to start first with yourself, to build yourself as a leader you want to be. And that's it for today. Thank you very much.